This is a typed bound copy consisting of 87 pages. The Ambata Sutta starts at page 69 of the manuscript, and after page 70, pages are numbered from A to Z. The beginning of page 71 starts with Lohika Stuta. Editors. 1. Aryan Society. 2. Buddha and Reform. 1. It was Sir T. Madhava Rao who, speaking of Hindu society of his time, said, inverted commas open, the longer one lives, observes and thinks, the more deeply does he feel that there is no community on the face of the earth which suffers less from political evils and more from self-inflicted or self-accepted or self-created and therefore avoidable evils than the Hindu community. Inverted commas close. This view expresses, quite accurately and without exaggeration, the necessity of social reform in Hindu society. The first social reformer and the greatest of all is Gautam Buddha. Any history of social reform must begin with him, and no history of social reform in India will be complete which omits to take the account of his great achievements. Siddhartha, surnamed Gautama, was born in the Sakya clan at Kapilavastu in northern India, on the borders of Nepal in 563 BC. Tradition says he was a prince. He received education fit for a prince, was married and had a son. Oppressed by the evils and misery then prevalent in the Aryan society, he renounced the world at the age of 29 and left his home in search for truth and deliverance. He became a mendicant and studied with two distinguished teachers, but finding that the teachings did not satisfy him, he left them and became an ascetic. He gave up that also, being futile. By hard thinking, he got insight into things, and as a result of this insight, he formulated his own Dhamma. This was at the age of 35. The remainder of his 80 years he spent in spreading his Dhamma and founding and administering an order of monks. He died about the year 483 BC at Kusinara, surrounded by his devoted followers. To the carrying out of his mission, the Buddha devoted all his days after the achievement of enlightenment. This time was divided between feeding the lamp of his own spiritual life by solitary meditation, just as Jesus spent hours in lonely prayer, and active preaching to large audiences of his monk, instructing the more advanced in the subtle points of inner development, directing the affairs of the order, rebuking breaches of discipline, confirming the faithful in their virtue, receiving deputations, carrying on discussions with the learned opponents, comforting the sorrowful, visiting kings and peasants, Brahmins and outcasts, rich and poor. He was a friend of publicans and sinners, and many a public harlot, finding herself understood and pitied, gave up her evil ways to take refuge in the Blessed One. Such a life demanded a variety of moral qualities and social gifts, and among others, a combination of democratic sentiments with an aristocratic savoir-faire which is seldom met with. In reading the dialogues, one can never forget that Gautama had the birth and upbringing of an aristocrat. He converses not only with Brahmins and Pandits, but with princes and ministers and kings on easy and equal terms. He is a good diner out, with a fund of anecdotes and apparently a real sense of humor, and is a welcome guest at every house. A distinguished Brahmin is pictured as describing him thus, inverted commas open, the venerable Gautama is well born on both sides, of pure descent, is handsome, pleasant to look upon, inspiring trust, gifted with great beauty of complexion, fair in colour, fine in presence, stately to behold, virtuous with the virtue of the Arhats, gifted with goodness and virtue, and with a pleasant voice and polite address, with no passion of lust left in him, nor any fickleness of mind. He bids all men welcome, is congenial, conciliatory, not supercilious, accessible to all, not backward in conversation. Inverted commas close. But what appealed most to the India of his time, and has appealed most to India through the ages, is expressed by Brahmin in these words, inverted commas open. The monk Gautama has gone forth into the religious life, giving up the great clan of his relatives, giving up money and gold, treasure both buried and above ground. Truly, while he was still a young man, without a grey hair on his head, in the beauty of his early manhood, he went forth from the household life into homeless state. Such a life as his demanded not only pleasant manners, sympathy and kindness, but firmness and courage. When the occasion required it, he could be calmly serve with those who worked evil for the order. Physical pain he bore not only with equanimity, but with no diminution of his inner joy. Courage also was needed and was found, as, for example, in the Buddha's clan, attitude during Devdatta's various attempts to assassinate him, in facing threats of murder, and in the conversion of the famous bandit in the kingdom of Kosala, whom all the countryside feared, and whom the Buddha visited alone and unarmed, in his lyre, changing him from a scourge of the kingdom to a peaceful member of the order. Neither pain, danger, nor insults marred his spiritual peace. When he was reviled, he reviled not again, nor was he lacking in tender thoughtfulness for those who needed his comfort and support. Inverted commas, close. He was beloved of all. Repeatedly, he is described or describes himself as one born into the world for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, for the advantage, the good, the happiness of gods and men, out of compassion for the world. He left an indelible mark on the Aryan society, and although his name has gone out of India, the impression of his teaching still remains. His religion spread like wildfire. It soon became the religion of the whole of India. But it did not remain confined to India. It reached every corner of then known world. All races accepted it. Even the Afghans were once Buddhist. It did not remain confined to Asia. There is evidence to show that Buddhism was the religion of Celtic Britain. Reference, Dr. Donald A. McNice, Buddhism in Pre-Christian Britain, Blackie and Son, London, 1928, editors. Reference close. What was the cause of this rapid spread of Buddhism? On this point, Professor Hopkins has said it's worth quoting. This is what he says, inverted commas open. The cause then of the rapid spread of Buddhism at the beginning of its career lies only in the conditions of its teaching and the influential backing of its founder. It was the individual Buddha that captivated men. It was the teaching emanated from him that fired enthusiasm. It was his position as an aristocrat that made him accept to the aristocracy, his magnetism that made him the idol of the people. From every page stand out the strong, attractive personality of the teacher and winner of hearts. No man ever lived so godless, yet so godlike, arrogating to himself no dignity, despairing of future bliss, but without a fear, as without hope, leader of thought, but despising lovingly the folly of the world, exalted, but adorned. The universal brother, he wandered among men, simply, serenely, with gentle irony, subduing them that opposed him, to congregation after congregation, speaking with majestic sweetness, the master to each, the friend of all. His voice was singularly vibrant and eloquent. His very tones convinced the hearer, his looks inspired awe. From the tradition it appears that he must have been one of those whose personality alone suffices to make a man not only a leader, but a god to the hearts of his fellows. When such a one speaks, he obtains hearers. It matters little what he says, for he influences the motions, and bends whoever listens to his will. But if added to his personality, if encompassing it, there be the feeling in the minds of others that what this man teaches is not only a variety, but the very hope of their salvation. If for the first time they recognize in his words the truth that makes of slaves free men, of classes a brotherhood, then it is not difficult to see wherein lies the lightning-like speed with which the electric current passes from heart to heart. Such a man was Buddha. Such was the essential of his teaching, and such was the inevitable rapidity of Buddhistic expansion. and the profound influence of the shock that was produced by the new faith upon the moral consciousness of Buddha's people. Inverted commas, close. To understand the great reform which he brought about by his teaching, it is necessary to have some idea of the degraded condition of the Aryan civilization at the time when Buddha started on the mission of his life. The Aryan community of his time was steeped in the worst kind of debauchery, social, religious and spiritual. To mention only a few evils, attention may be drawn to gambling. Gambling had become widespread among the Aryans as drinking. Every king had a hall of gambling attached to his palace. Every king had an expert gambler in his employment as a companion to play with. King Virat had in his employment Kank as an expert gambler. Gambling was not merely a pastime with kings. They played with heavy stakes. They staked kingdoms, dependents, relatives, slaves, servants. Reference Mahabharat, Vanaparva. Reference close. King Nala staked everything in gambling with Paskar and lost everything. The only thing he did not stake was himself and his wife Damayanti. Nala had to go and live in the forest as a beggar. There were kings who went beyond Nala. The Mahabharata, reference Mahabharata Sabha Parva, reference close, tells how the eldest of the Pandavas gambled and staked everything, his brothers and also his and their wife Draupadi. Gambling was a matter of honor with the Aryans, and any invitation to gamble was regarded as an injury to one's honor and dignity. Dharma gambled with such disastrous consequences, although he was warned beforehand. His excuse was that he was invited to gamble, and that as a man of honor he could not decline such an invitation. This vice of gambling was not confined to kings. It had infected even the common folk. Rigveda contains lamentations of a poor Aryan ruined by gambling. The habit of gambling had become so common in Kautilya's time that there were gambling houses licensed by the king from which the king derived considerable revenue. Drinking was another evil which was rampant among the Aryans. Liquors were of two sorts, Soma and Sura. Soma was a sacrificial wine. The drinking of the Soma was in the beginning permitted only to Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. Subsequently, it was permitted only to Brahmins and Kshatriyas. The Vaishyas were excluded from it, and the Shudras were never permitted to taste it. Its manufacture was a secret known only to the Brahmins. Sura was open to all, and was drunk by all. The Brahmins also drank Sura. Shukracharya, the priest of the Asuras, drank so heavily that in his drunken state he gave the life-giving mantra, known to him only, and with which he used to revive the Asuras killed by Devas, to Kach, the son of Brihaspati, who was the priest of the Devas. The Mahabharata mentions an occasion when both Krishna and Arjun were dead drunk. That shows that the best among the Aryan society were not only not free from the drink habit, but that they drank heavily. The most shameful part of it was that even the Aryan women were addicted to drink. For instance, Sudeshana, reference Vanaparva, reference close, the wife of the king Virat, tells her maid Sarindhari to go to Kichaka's palace and bring Sura, as she was dying to have a drink. It is not to be supposed that only queens indulged in drinking. The habit of drinking was common among women of all classes, and even Brahmin women were not free from it. That liquor and dancing was indulged in by the Aryan woman is clear from Kausitaki Griha Sutra 1, which says, inverted commas open, 4 or 8 women who are not widowed, after having been regaled with wine and food, are to dance for 4 times on the night previous to the wedding ceremony. Inverted commas close. Turning to the Aryan society, it was marked by class war and class degradation. The Aryan society recognized 4 classes: the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. These divisions were not merely horizontal divisions, all on a par with each other in the matter of social relationship. These divisions had become vertical, one above the other, being placed above or below. There was both jealousy and rivalry among the four classes. This jealousy and rivalry had given rise to even enmity. This enmity was particularly noticeable between the two highest classes, namely the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, and there was a regular class war between the two, so intense that it would delight the heart of any Marxian to read the descriptions thereof. Unfortunately, there is no detailed history of this class war between the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. Only a few instances have been recorded. Veena, Puraravas, Nahusha, Sudas, Sumukh and Nimi were some of the Kshatriya kings who came into conflict with the Brahmins. The issue in these conflicts were different. The issue between Veena and the Brahmins was whether a king could command and require the Brahmins to worship him and offer sacrifice to him instead of the gods. The issue between Puraravas and the Brahmins was whether a Kshatriya king could confiscate the property of a Brahmin. The issue between Nahusha and the Brahmins was whether a Kshatriya king could order a Brahmin to do a servile job. The issue between Nimi and the Brahmins was whether the king was bound to employ only his family priest at the sacrificial ceremony. The issue between Sudas and the Brahmins was whether the king was bound to employ only a Brahmin as a priest. This shows how big were the issues between the two classes. No wonder that the struggle between them was also the bitterest. The wars between them were not merely occasional riots. They were wars of extermination. It is stated that Parshuram, a Brahmin, fought against the Kshatriyas 21 times and killed every Kshatriya. While the two classes were fighting among themselves for supremacy, they both combined to keep down the Vaishyas and the Shudras. The Vaishya was a milch cow. He lived only to pay taxes. The Shudra was a general beast of burden. These two classes existed for the sole purpose of making the life of the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas glorious and happy. They had no right to live for themselves. They lived to make the life of theirs better possible. Below these two classes, there were two others. There were the Chandalas and the Shwapakas. They were not untouchables, but they were degraded. They were outside the pale of the society and outside the pale of law. They had no rights and no opportunities. They were the rejects of the Aryan society. The sexual immorality of the Aryan society must shock their present-day descendants. The Aryans of pre-Buddhist days had no such rule of prohibited degrees as we have today to govern their sexual or matrimonial relationship. According to the Aryan mythology, Brahma is the creator. Brahma had 3 sons and a daughter. His one son, Daksha, married his sister. The daughters born of this marriage between brother and sister were married, some to Kashyapa, the son of Maharishi, the son of Brahma, and some to Dharma, the third son of Brahma. Reference Mahabharat Adhiparva, Adhyay 66. Reference close. In the Rig Veda, there is an episode related of Yama and Yami, brother and sister. According to this episode, Yami the sister invites her brother Yama to cohabit with her and becomes angry when he refuses to do so. Reference Rig Veda. Reference close. A father could marry his daughter. Vasishtha married his own daughter Shatrupa when she came of age. Reference Harivansha, Adhyay 2. Reference close. Manu married his daughter Ela. Reference Ibid, Adhyay 10. Reference close. Janu married his daughter Janvi. Reference Ibid, Adhyay 28. Reference close. Surya married his daughter Usha. Reference Yashak Niruta, Adhyay 5, Khanda 6. Reference close. There was polyandry, not of the ordinary type. The polyandry prevalent among the Aryans was a polyandry when kinsmen cohabited with one woman. Daha Prachetani and his son Soma cohabited with Marisha, the daughter of Soma. Reference Harishvansha, Adhyay 2. Reference close. Instances of grandfather marrying his granddaughter are not wanting. Daksha gave his daughter in marriage to his father Brahma. Reference Ibid, Adhyay 3. Reference close. And from that marriage was born the famous Narada. Dohitra gave his 27 daughters to his father Soma for cohabitation and procreation. The Aryans did not mind cohabiting with women in the open and within sight of people. The rishis used to perform certain religious rites which were called Vamdevya Vrata. These rites used to be performed on the Yadna Bhumi. If any woman came there and expressed a desire for sexual intercourse and asked the sage to satisfy her, the sage used to cohabit with her then and there in the open on the Yadna Bhumi. Instances of this may be mentioned. The case of the sage Parashara had sexual intercourse with Satyavati and also Drigdhapa. That such a custom was common is shown by the existence of the word Ayoni. The word Ayoni is understood to mean of immaculate conception. That is not, however, the original meaning of the word. The original meaning of the word Yoni is house. Ayoni means conceived out of the house, that is, in the open. That there was nothing deemed to be wrong in this is clear from the fact that both Sita and Draupadi were Ayonija. That this was very common is clear from the fact that religious injunctions had to be issued against such a practice. Reference Mahabharata Adiparva Adhyay 193. Reference close. There was prevalent among the Aryans the practice of renting out their women to others for a time. As an illustration may be mentioned the story of Madhavi, the king Yajati Madhavi as an offering to his guru Galav. Galav rented out the girl Madhavi to 3 kings, each a period. Thereafter he gave her in marriage to Vishwamitra. She remained with him until a son was born to her. Thereafter Galav took away the girl and gave her back to her father Yayati. Besides the practice of letting out women to others temporarily, at rent, there was prevalent among the Aryans another practice, namely allowing procreation by the best amongst them. Raising a family was treated by them as though it was a breeding or stock raising. Among the Aryas, there was a class of persons called Devas, who were Aryans but of superior status and prowess. The Aryans allowed their women to have sexual intercourse with any one of the class of Devas in the interest of good breeding. This practice prevailed so extensively that prelibation in respect of the Aryan woman as their prospective right. No Aryan women could be married unless this right of prelibation had been redeemed and the woman released from the control of the Devas by offering what was technically called Avadan, the Laja Homi, which is performed in every Hindu marriage and the details of which are given in Ashvalyan Graya Sutra, is a relic of this act of the redemption of the Aryan woman from the right of prelibation of the Devas. The Avadan in the Laja Homa is nothing but the price for extinguishment of the right of the Devas over the bride. The Satabdi performed in all Hindu marriages and which is regarded as the most essential ceremony, without which there is no lawful marriage, has an integral connection with this right of prelibation of the Devas. Saptapadi means walking by the bridegroom 7 steps with the bride. Why is this essential? The answer is that the Devas, if they were dissatisfied with the compensation, could claim the women before the 7th step was taken. After the 7th step was taken, the right of the Devas was extinguished and the bridegroom could take away the bride and live as husband and wife without being obstructed or molested by the Devas. There was no rule of chastity for maidens. A girl could have sexual intercourse with and also progeny from anybody without contracting marriage. This is evident from the root meaning of the word Kanya, which means a girl. Kanya comes from the root Kam, which means a girl free to offer herself to any man. That they did offer themselves to any man and had children without contracting regular marriage is illustrated in the case of Kunti and Matsyagandha. Kunti had children from different men before she was married to Pandu, and Matsyagandha had sexual intercourse with sage Parashara before she married to Shantanu, the father of Bhishma. Bestiality was also prevalent among the Aryans. The story of the sage Dham having sexual intercourse with a female deer is well known. Another instance is that of Surya cohabiting with a mare. But the most hideous instance is that of the woman having sexual intercourse with the horse in the Ashwamedha Yadna. The religion of the Aryan consisted of the Yadna or sacrifice. The sacrifice was a means to enter into the godhead of the gods and even to control the gods. The traditional sacrifices were 21 in number, divided into 3 classes of 7 each. The first was sacrifices of butter, milk, corn, etc. The second class covered soma, sacrifices, and third, animal sacrifices. The sacrifice may be of short duration or long duration, lasting for a year or more. The latter was called as satra. The argument in favor of the sacrifice is that eternal holiness is won by him that offers the sacrifice. Not only a man's self, but also his manes, stood to benefit by the means of sacrifice. He gives the manes pleasure with his offerings, but he also raises their estate and sends them to live in a higher world. Reference: this is taken from Hopkins, The Religions of India. Reference close. The sacrifice was by no means meant as an aid to the acquirement of the heavenly bliss alone. Many of the great sacrifices were for the gaining of good things on earth. That one should sacrifice without the ulterior motive of gain is unknown. Brahmanic India knew no thank offering. Ordinarily, the gain is presented as an compensating gift from the divinity whom they sacrifice. The sacrifice began with the recitation, inverted commas open. He offers the sacrifice to the god with the text, "Do thou give to me, and I will give to thee. Do thou bestow on me, and I will bestow on thee." Inverted commas close. The ceremony of the sacrifice was awe-inspiring. Every word was pregnant with consequences, and even the pronunciation of the word or accent was fateful. There are indications, however, that the priests themselves understood that much in the ceremonial was pure hocus, not of much importance as it made out to be. Every sacrifice meant fee to the priest. As to fee, the rules were precise and the propounders were unblushing. The priest performed the sacrifice for the fee alone, and it must consist of valuable garments, kine, horses, or gold. When even was to be given was carefully stated. The priest had built up a great complex of forms, where at every turn fees were demanded, the whole expense falling on one individual for whose benefit the sacrifice was performed. Must have been enormous. How costly the whole thing became can be seen from the fact that in one place the fee for the sacrifice is mentioned as 1,000 cows. For this greed, which went so far that he proclaimed that he who gives 1,000 cows obtain all things of heaven, the priest had a good precedent to cite, for the gods of heaven, in all tales told of them, ever demand a reward from each other when they help their neighbor gods. If the gods seek rewards, the priest has a right to do the same. The principal sacrifice was the animal sacrifice. It was both costly and barbaric. In the Aryan civilization, there are 5 sacrificial animals mentioned. In the list of sacrificial animals, man came first. The sacrifice of a man was costliest. The rules of sacrifice required that the individual to be slaughtered must be neither a priest nor a slave. He must be a Kshatriya or Vaishya. According to the ordinary evaluation of those times, the cost of buying a man to be sacrificed was 1,000 cows. Besides being costly and barbaric, it must have been revolting, because the sacrificers had not only to kill the man, but to eat him. Next to man came the horse. That also was a costly sacrifice, because the horse was a rare and a necessary animal for the Aryans in their conquest of India. The Aryans could hardly afford such a potent instrument of military domination to be offered as sacrifice. The sacrifice must have been revolting, inasmuch as one of the rituals in the horse sacrifice was the copulation of the horse before it was slaughtered with the wife of the sacrificer. The animals most commonly offered for sacrifice were, of course, the cattle, which were used by the people for their agriculture purposes. They were mostly cows and bullocks. The yadnas were costly, and they could have died out of sheer consideration of expenses involved. But they did not. The reason is the stoppage of the yajna involved the question of the loss of the Brahmin's fees. There could be no fees if the yajna ceased to be performed, and the Brahmin would starve. The Brahmin therefore found a substitute for the costly sacrificial animal. For a human sacrifice, the Brahmin allowed as a substitute for a live man, a man of straw or metal or earth. But they did not altogether give up human sacrifice for fear that this yajna might be stopped and they could lose their fees. When human sacrifice became rare, animal sacrifice came in as a substitute. Animal sacrifice was also a question of expense to the laity. Here again, rather than allow the sacrifice to go out of the wog, the Brahmins came forward with smaller animals for cattle, just as cattle has been allowed to take place of the man and the horse. All this was for the purpose of maintaining the yajna, so that the Brahmin did not lose his fees, which was his maintenance. So set were the Brahmins on the continuance of the yajna that they were satisfied with merely rice as an offering. It must not, however, be supposed that the institution of substitutes of the yajnas of the Aryans had become less horrid. The introduction of the substitutes did not work as a complete replacement of the more expensive and more ghastly sacrifice by the less expensive and the more innocent. All that it meant was that the offering may be according to the capacity of the sacrificer. If he was poor, his offering may be rice. If he was well-to-do, it might be a goat. If he was rich, it might be a man, horse, cow, or a bull. The effect of the substitutes was that the yajna was brought within the capacity of all, so that the Brahmin reaped a larger harvest of the feast on the total. If did not have the effect of stopping animal sacrifices. Indeed, animals continued to be sacrificed by the thousands. The yajna often became a regular carnage of cattle, at which the Brahmins did not work of butchers. One gets some idea of the extent of this carnage of innocent animals from reference to the yajnas which one come across in Buddhist literature. In the Suttanipat, a description is given of the yajna that was arranged to be performed by Pasindi, king of Kosala. It is stated that they were tied to the poles for slaughter at the yajna 500 oxen, 500 bulls, 500 cows, 500 goats, and 500 lambs, and that the servants of the king, who were detailed to do the jobs according to the orders given to them by the officiating Brahmin priest, were doing their duties with tears in their eyes. The yajna, besides involving a terrible carnage, was really a kind of carnival. Beside roast meat, there was drink. The Brahmins had soma as well as sura. The others had sura in abundance. Almost every yajna was followed by gambling, and what is most extraordinary is that, side by side, there went on also sexual intercourse in the open. Yajna had become debauchery, and there was no religion left in it. The Aryan religion was just a series of observances. Behind these observances, there was no yearning for good and a virtuous life. There was no hunger or thirst for righteousness. Their religion was without any spiritual content. The hymns of the Rig Veda furnish very good evidence of the absence of any spiritual basis for the Aryan religion. The hymns are prayers addressed by the Aryans to their gods. What do they ask for in these prayers? Do they ask to be kept away from temptation? Do they ask for deliverance from evil? Do they ask for forgiveness of sins? Most of the hymns are in praises of Indra. They praise him for having brought destruction to the enemies of the Aryans. They praise him because he killed all the pregnant wives of Krishna and Asura. They praise him because he destroyed hundreds of villages of the Asuras. They praise him because he killed lakh of the Sioux. The Aryans pray to Indra to carry on a greater destruction among the Anaryas in the hope that they may secure to themselves the food supplies of the Anaryas and the wealth of the Anaryas. Far from being spiritual and elevating, the hymns of the Rig Veda are saturated with wicked thoughts and wicked purposes. The Aryan religion never concerned itself with what is called a righteous life. Second, such a state of the Aryan society when Buddha was born. There are two pertinent questions regarding Buddha as a reformer who labored to reform the Aryan society. What were the chief planks in his reform? To what extent did he succeed in his reform movement? To take up the first question, Buddha left that for the inculcation of a good and a pure life, example was better than percept. The most important thing he did was to lead a good and a pure life, so that it might serve as a model to all. How unblemished a life he led can be gathered from the Brahmajala Sutta. It is reproduced below because it not only gives an idea of the pure life that Buddha led, but it also gives an idea of how impure a life the Brahmins, the best among the Aryans, led. Brahmajala Sutta 1. Thus have I heard, the Blessed One was once going along the high road between Rajagha and Nalanda with the great company of the brethren, with about 500 brethren. And Supaya, the mendicant, too was going along the high road between Rajagha and Nalanda with his disciple, the young Brahmadatta. Now just then Supaya, the mendicant, was speaking in many ways in dispraise of the Buddha, in dispraise of the doctrine, in dispraise of the order. But young Brahmadatta, his pupil, gave utterance in many ways to praise of the Buddha, to praise of the doctrine, to praise of the order. Thus they two, teacher and pupil, holding opinions in direct contradiction of one to the other, were following, step by step, after the Blessed One and the company of the brethren. Now the Blessed One put up at the royal rest house in the Ambalathika pleasance to pass the night, and with him the company of the brethren. And so also did Supaya, the mendicant, and with him his young disciple Brahmadatta. And there at the rest houses these two carried on the same discussion as before. And in the early dawn a number of the brethren assembled as they rose up in the pavilion, and this was the trend of the talk that sprang up among them as they were seated there. How wonderful a thing is, brethren, and how strange that the Blessed One, he who knows and sees, the Arhat, the Buddha Supreme, should so clearly have perceived how various are the inclination of men. For see how while Supaya, the mendicant, speaks in many ways in dispraise of the Buddha, the doctrine and the order, his own disciple, young Brahmadatta, speaks in as many ways in praise of them. So do these, teacher and pupil, follow step by step after the Blessed One and the company of the brethren, giving utterance to views in direct contradiction of one to the other. Now the Blessed One, on realizing what was the drift of their talk, went to the pavilion and took his seat on the mat spread out for him. And when he had sat down, he said, inverted commas open, what is the talk on which you are engaged sitting here? And what is the subject of the conversation between you? Inverted commas close. And they told him all, and he said, Brethren, if outsiders should speak against me, or against the doctrine, or against the order, you should not on that account either bear malice, or suffer heart-burning, or feel ill will. If you, on that account, should be angry and hurt, that would stand in the way of your own self-conquest. If, when others speak against us, you feel angry at that and displeased, would you then be able to judge how far that speech of theirs is well said or ill? That would not be so, sir. But when outsiders speak in dispraise of me, or of the doctrine, or of the order, you should unravel what is false and point it out as wrong, saying, for this or that reason, this is not the fact. That is not so. Such a thing is not found among us, is not in us. Inverted commas close. But also, brethren, if outsiders should speak in praise of me, in praise of the doctrine, in praise of the order, you should not, on that account, be filled with pleasure or gladness, or be lifted up in heart. Were you to be, so that also would stand in the way of your self-conquest. When outsiders speak in praise of me, or of doctrine, or of the order, you should acknowledge what is right to be the fact, saying, for this or that reason, this is the fact, that is so. Such a thing is found among us, is in us. It is in respect only of trifling things, of matters of little value, of mere morality, than an unconverted man, when praising the Tathagata, would speak. And what are such trifling, minor details of mere morality that he would praise? For the moralities part 1, inverted commas open, putting away the killings of living things. Gautama, the recluse, holds aloof from the destruction of life. He has set the cudgel and the sword aside, and ashamed of roughness and full of mercy, he dwells compassionate and kind to all creatures that have life. Inverted commas close. It is thus that the unconverted man, when speaking in praise of the Tathagata, might speak. For he might say, inverted commas open, putting away the taking of what has not been given, Gautama the recluse lived aloof from grasping what is not his own. He takes only what is given, and expecting that gifts will come, he passes his life in honesty and purity of heart. Inverted commas close. Or he might say, inverted commas open, putting away unchastity, Gautama the recluse is chaste. He holds himself aloof, far off from the vulgar practice, from the sexual act. Inverted commas close. For he might say, inverted commas open, putting away lying words, Gautama the recluse holds himself aloof from falsehood. He speaks truth from the truth. He never swerves, faithful and trustworthy. He breaks not his word to the world. Inverted commas close. Or he might say, inverted commas open, putting away slander, Gautama the recluse holds himself aloof from calumny. What he hears, here, he repeats not elsewhere to raise a quarrel against the people here. What he hears, elsewhere, he repeats not here to raise a quarrel against the people there. Thus does he live as a binder together of those who are divided, an encourager of those who are friends, a peacemaker, a lover of peace, impassioned for peace, a speaker of words that make for peace. Inverted commas close. Or he might say, inverted commas open, putting away rudeness of speech, Gautama the recluse holds himself aloof from harsh language. Whatsoever words is blameless, pleasant to the ear, lovely, reaching to the heart, urbane, pleasing to the people, beloved of the people, such are the words he speaks. Inverted commas close. Or he might say, inverted commas open, putting away frivolous talk, Gautama the recluse holds himself aloof from vain conversations. In season he speaks, in accordance with the facts, words full of meaning on religion, on the discipline of the order. He speaks, and at the right time, words worthy to be laid up in one's heart, fitly illustrated, clearly divided to the point. Inverted commas close. Or he might say, inverted commas open, Gautama the recluse holds himself aloof from causing injury to seeds or plants. He takes but one meal a day, not eating at night, refraining from food after hours. After midday, he refrains from being a spectator at shows at fairs, with notched dancers, singing and music. He abstains from wearing, adorning or ornamenting himself with garlands, scents and unguents. He abstains from the use of large and lofty beds. He abstains from accepting silver or gold. He abstains from accepting uncooked food. He abstains from accepting raw meat. He abstains from accepting women or girls. He abstains from accepting bondmen or bondwomen. He abstains from accepting sheep or goats. He abstains from accepting fowls or swine. He abstains from accepting elephants, cattle, horse and mare. He abstains from accepting cultivated fields or waste. He abstains from the acting as a go-between or messenger. He abstains from buying and selling. He abstains from cheating with scales or bronze or measures. He abstains from the crooked ways of bribery, cheating and fraud. He abstains from maiming, murder, putting in bonds, highway robbery, dacoity and violence. Inverted commas close.